All right, everybody, welcome back. It's the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and today we are talking about the utopian promise of the internet. That's right. Mm-hmm. And how it was or was not borne out and realized. This is kind of a broad topic. There are a lot of different ways one could approach it.
Yeah.
We're not going to do any news this week because we have a special episode just on the reflecting pool in the works, focusing entirely on that catastrophe, which is, if nothing else, world historically significant.
Mm-hmm.
Psych. But yeah, it's a big topic. The internet is so ubiquitous in our lives now, and I think in large measure, at least in the last few years especially, maybe since the Trump era, seen as a broadly negative phenomenon, right? That what the internet has brought to bear is fragmentation of...
I mean, even before that, surveillance states, Snowden, all this stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You could go back even further. I've been watching a documentary about the Silk Road today, which is another example.
Casualty.
It's funny how, although not anymore, now Ross Ulbricht is free to preach his gospel of libertarianism far and wide. May God bless him. I mean, I always thought the sentencing of him was a little over the top. Clearly, they were trying to make an example. But actually, I think the Silk Road in some ways is sort of a useful metaphor for the main problem that we'll see over and over again with the internet, which is whatever liberatory or potentially utopian even possibilities were promised or lay dormant within the internet were basically strangled in the grave by obeisance to older paradigms, older hierarchies.
Yeah. And the let's just say the opiate of the attention economy, combined with a commodification and insistence on advertising.
Yeah. I mean, I think advertising was always going to be part of the bargain, unfortunately. So I thought, we collected some interesting articles. You'll find links to everything that we cite in the show notes, of course, if you want to go look for yourself. One of the first things I pulled up was from 1992, which is a year after the World Wide Web is introduced. It first appears in 1991. I guess even before we get into this statement from the Clinton administration, what was your when do you first remember getting on the internet, Michael?
My first real memory would be, I want to say, I can't remember. Like, whoa, was when I was living in England. So I believe that would have been 1995. And I was able to follow the scores of March Madness. And it would update kind of in this staggered way. It was so slow, but you could actually see the scores. And I was obsessed with college basketball as a kid.
Of course.
So that always stuck with me. It was just that, like, the first time being like, whoa, this information is being like given to me. I don't know how quickly it was happening then, but obviously much more quicker than ever before. And this was a time when obviously you weren't exactly able to tune into the NCAA tournament in the northwest of England.
Right. I mean, it was certainly quicker than picking up the box score at the newspaper office the next morning.
That's right.
Which was sort of, I mean, I still remember, I was on the internet, you'll be shocked to learn, very early. In fact, during the Challenger disaster, I'm just kidding. It was a little bit after that, but definitely in the early 90s, I would say 1990 or 1991, I was on Prodigy, which was an early internet service. My dad had an account. My dad has always been very tech forward, very, very into tech, very early adopter, very into video games in the 90s when it was sort of insane to think of one's father as playing video games. He was way ahead of the curve. And so I would use that. It was very basic, but the first time I really remember being on it was the summer of 93 when I had switched to CompuServe. And this was a text-based internet service provider. So your modem would call up CompuServe. You'd hook up, and then there would just be a stream of text would come across your, when you were signing in. You type in your password or whatever, and then it would be a list of forums. Which one do you want to navigate to? And this is around the time when I was becoming, like you, obsessed with basketball. So I remember primarily being interested in it for two things: comic books and basketball. Those were the two things I was obsessed with at the time. And
how did it help?
How did it help? I mean, I met a lot of people around the world and convinced them I was an adult and tricked them into drawing comic books for me. It's perhaps a story, for another time. And even published a comic or contributed to the publication of a comic that came out when I was 12. So I've not published a single comic since, but I got
something of a prodigy at the time.
A very prodigious start. Well, the great thing about the internet when it was all text-based is if you could write well, you could deceive anyone about how old you were, because there was no profile photo, there was no anything.
Right.
But I specifically remember going on to a lot of NBA forums that summer. This is the year Michael Jordan retired. And it was and Kukoc was coming over. I remember getting a lot of heated debates about how Kukoc would perform, in the absence of Jordan.
Sure.
Really crucial stuff. And, it's been all downhill since then. I wish I could go back to that golden. At that time, I would say, as a child, I would have been 12. There was a real freedom in the idea that no one could see me. No one knew that I was 12. If I could write competently, and I was, I've always been a pretty precocious writer, I guess you could say. There wasn't any easy way for anyone to verify anything you said, right?
Okay.
So that to me seemed extraordinarily liberatory, right? I remember having thoughts, and I even wrote a few years later, I wrote a paper about how this potential in the internet could eradicate racism, because you'd be interacting with people based only on how they,
mission accomplished.
Well, I mean, little did I know, this, but at the time it seemed, I remember this was about the Ralph Waldo Ellison novel, Invisible Man. And I said, on the internet, we're kind of like the Invisible Man, because instead of being judged by our skin or by our appearance, we're judged instead by our writing and our words, and that this was kind of in keeping with the spirit of that novel in some ways.
Yeah. Can we stop?
Sure.
Sorry, I realized I have the AC on.
It doesn't matter. I can't hear it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Carry on.
No, it's fine. So yeah, I was very idealistic about the internet in the 90s. It seemed really a good way to meet people with weird interests. I think a lot of queer people have spoken to the fact that it's only through the internet that they were able to realize there were other people like them for the first time. Sure. I think was certainly a powerful and positive thing. But, there's also the other side of the coin, so to speak. And I think that's kind of more what we'll be focusing on today. Just to go back to where we started, in 1992, I mean, I was watching some clips about not even the internet, just the dawn of personal computing, where people were doing like a news story from around the time I was born, I think 1982. And people are like,
oh, wow.
Why, because that's kind of when the personal computing market started to become accessible to average consumers, right? Okay. Prior to that, to have a computer in your house, you had to be quite wealthy, right? These computers were still very expensive at that time, but, $500, you could get like a word processor that could play video games that,
Sure.
And there's all these people who are at a like computer store. Remember computer stores? That used to be a thing.
Oh yeah.
And people are like, what are you going to do with this thing? And, I'm really looking forward to having a word processor. I think it's going to be great, help me work a lot from home. Other people, one of the salesmen is like, hey, don't think you're going to take this thing home and it's going to work right away. You're going to have to spend a month, 2 months, 3 months. You're going to learn the language. You got to learn, and it's like, I remember that time in computing when it was like, and when you had to learn DOS at the very least, you had to learn this like operating language in order to just get the computer to open Microsoft Word or whatever the equivalent was at the time, right? So we have this quote from the Clinton in 1992, which was, the first technocratic administration with Clinton and Gore, both younger guys. Gore, in particular, was chosen to spearhead the
right.
the
To
internet.
the point where he became a laughingstock despite his obvious influence.
Right. Well, I think that was even from a little bit earlier because he'd helped pass legislation that enabled the internet.
Right. And then didn't he famously say he invented the internet?
Yes, I think that was slightly misconstrued, but
shocked to hear it.
Yeah. But, Al Gore was like the third topic we ever covered on this show. Isn't it funny to think back to that halcyon era? There's just a quote from this New York Times article that I thought was really interesting. As a peace dividend from the Cold War's end, which I just love, just that alone. It's like, remember that was the big promise. Like the Cold War is over. We don't have to spend as many billions and trillions on defeating the Russians, right? We're gonna redirect that money back into the economy. A minimum of $30 billion over 4 years is to be taken from the Pentagon's research budget. Wait a minute, we're taking money from the Pentagon? Surely this will happen. And put into advanced work in areas like robotics, smart roads, biotechnology, machine tools, magnetic levitation trains, fiber optic communications, and national computer networks.
Check.
Also earmarked are a raft of basic technologies like digital imaging and data storage, which are increasingly seen as the underlying secret of lasting commercial success. So I like
that. I like that even in this like release, there's a nod to like the commercial potential of these things.
Right. I mean, I just found this.
There's more peace dividends where that came from.
I love this reminds me of the, in a world without lawyers, and then they show you the image of the futuristic city or whatever, that meme. Right. That's kind of what I'm getting from this, right? Especially the magnetic levitation trains, right? The idea that we're just going to have these trains that hover over the track and then shoot off incredibly fast, right? So the Clintons were thinking about this. I don't think a lot of this stuff was realized, but of course the internet, the infrastructure that was in the internet eventually was built. Time magazine the following year talks a little bit about the potential of the internet. This is Time magazine in 1993. Now imagine a medium that combines the switching and routing capabilities of phones with the video and information offerings of the most advanced cable systems and data banks. Instead of settling for whatever happens to be on at a particular time, you could select any item from an encyclopedic menu of offerings, have it routed directly to your television set or computer screen. A movie? Airline listings?
A movie? Feel free to scroll aimlessly for 17 hours to try to find one of a myriad mediocre offerings.
Tomorrow's newspaper or yesterday's episode of Northern Exposure? Nice nod to Northern Exposure, right? How about a new magazine or book? A stroll through the LL Bean catalog? A teleconference with your boss? Well, I'm afraid there'll be quite a lot of that. A video phone call with your lover? Just punch up what you want, and it appears just when you want it.
You just punch up a video phone call with my lover, and it just appears?
Yeah.
I guess that does happen now.
Yeah. I mean, wherever your lover is, if they've got FaceTime, right? I mean, she
may not consider you her lover, but feel free to punch it up.
So a lot of this stuff is real. One of the things the Time magazine article goes on to talk about is this is going to lead to the dissolution of channels, the dissolution that everything's going to be kind of homogenized and agglomerated on the internet. And that whether it's ABC or NBC, CBS, whatever, that's not going to matter so much anymore. Oh, how wrong they were, right?
Yes, indeed.
Instead, we have this world where it's like, oh, you want to watch the old episodes of The Simpsons? I'm afraid you're going to have to sign up for Disney Plus. Oh, but
like a total of 6 shows? You're going to need 6 streaming services.
Right. Like that in fact, what we've seen is the reification of the network model in the digital space. And that hasn't been liberatory at all, right? I mean, you can steal a lot of this stuff, of course, but you have to have technological know-how. There has to be some level of awareness in place. And for most people, it's just not an option. I love the idea that just the Northern Exposure, the LL Bean catalog. I mean, remember catalogs?
Well, these things are very funny to me because reading this in 93, I feel I would have been like, I don't know, it's the big deal, LL Bean, Northern Exposure. But it's literally what we use it for.
Yeah, I mean, this is like kind of spot on, right?
Mm-hmm.
For once, Time Magazine's like middle of the road nonsense.
Yeah. The joy of a teleconference with your boss?
Yeah.
What if you work from home and never leave the confines of your apartment and become totally atomized?
Yeah. I mean, it sees all of this.
And good news, your boss can monitor your keystrokes from afar.
Yeah. Now, a couple other predictions. Good news. John Allen on the CBC said, he's talking about the internet and about the anonymity on the internet. He says, this is 93 as well. One would think that if you're anonymous, you do anything you want, but groups have their own sense of community and what we can do. So he's basically pushing back on the idea that anonymity will lead to the like lowest common denominator, worst behavior.
Right, because we're all ultimately decent people, and there would just be unspoken boundaries that everyone will adhere to forever. Thank you, John.
I will say that the early days of the internet were much more like that, but
absolutely,
in part because it was self-selecting. Like it actually took a little bit of effort to get on the internet in 1993. Yep. Like that's when I was on there. There were not flame wars. People were banned for getting involved in flame war. You know, people were kicked off forums.
Right. Am I right? There was a lot of moderation.
There was a lot of moderation. It was self-regulating, but it was also a self-selecting group of people that were on the internet. Yes. Right.
But sadly, it was the slow decline into making comedy illegal until Elon Musk came.
Right. And I mean, you know, every now and then I may have watched an illegal stream of a sporting event, say, hypothetically. Mm-hmm. I may have. I'm not saying I have, but it might have happened. And you ever see the little comment box that's like scrolling on the right of the screen sometimes when you first log in?
One of the things I'm like desperately trying to X out of.
Hide. Because what you see is just the most deranged, racist, psychotic, vitriol,
genocidal, right.
Just madness, homophobic, transphobic, just any kind of negative behavior you could imagine, or negative antisocial behavior you could imagine. It's happening right there in a constant stream for an entire.
In fact, in a way, in these mini platforms, right? Like something like the stream you're describing in the chat. The prediction isn't wrong in the sense that those groups appear to have their own sense of community and have decided what they can do. And unfortunately, it's the worst thing that you can do with speech pretty well.
Yeah. It is a little bit of a Hobbesian jungle out there, right? War of all against all. There is not the Rousseauian vision of the first man, which John
in fact, if you're in a stream like that and you decide to wade in and provide some sort of comment or in fact back, you will find yourself sort of blown away by the weight of the heinousness.
Yeah, I think that's right. One more thing, a slightly later prediction from someone called Wearing Partridge. Great name. It sounds like a Pynchon character. In Wired in 1996, he said, he's talking about, a lot of people thought in 1996 is kind of the moment the internet goes mainstream. A lot of big services start that year. That's the year, in my memory, that's the year when a lot of people I knew were suddenly on the internet. Whereas for the 3 years prior, I had been a freak. Only freaks like me were on it. And I think that's also around when AOL kind of came to dominance. And AOL, unlike CompuServe, these other CompuServe and Prodigy were primarily walled gardens, meaning you're on the internet, you're talking with people in other places, but you're doing it in a limited way because everything's within the confines of the Prodigy service, right? AOL was like that too, but also you could use AOL to go on the World Wide Web. And you could go beyond just the walled garden. But the internet was seen as a fad by a lot of people in 95 and 96 as it's blowing up. And this guy says most things that succeed don't require retraining 250 million people.
Yeah.
Now, was any training really necessary? You know what I mean? Like,
well, sure, I guess. But I mean, I think to be more generous about the failures of the internet, I would say that there was an incredible lack of exchange about literacy. I mean, this is a totally new type of media literacy. And I don't think anybody was particularly trained. They're sort of let loose as the years go by. And so that kind of makes sense to me. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but it didn't involve like companies. Well,
right. In a way, it's that precisely that like retraining or acclimating was impossible, sort of left under the weight of the speed of the evolution of the thing. Right. And so we just sort of like moved through it. And the disasters just sort of built on top of each other.
Right. And I guess you could see the dot-com bubble as being an example of that, right? Where things just got moving too quickly. So you have 96, AOL becomes one of the biggest companies in the world by the late 90s, right? Remember AOL bought Time Warner? Like, like this little thing that sent CDs to everyone in America like every 3 weeks or whatever was suddenly bigger than Warner Brothers, like this massive movie studio.
It's kind of interesting. Like we come all this way and then you have this thing, Netflix, that starts by, sending you CDs of movies and it's buying them. It's trying to buy them. You know what I mean? Like
it's failed, unfortunately.
Right. But the fact that it like had its hat in the ring alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is an interesting parallel. The CDs in the mail. Yes, I like that. Although DVDs, I guess, more.
If you want to see the danger, just take a look at who's trying to buy Time Warner.
So, that was all at a time when I was at boarding school. So I feel like I kind of missed out a lot on the like craze for like diapers.com and pets.com and like all these companies that were very niche. It was like, you can buy this one thing you need from this one company. And I remember going home from boarding school, my dad, like having all our groceries delivered on the internet in like the late 90s. Yeah. I mean, I told you my dad is very...
I didn't do that till the pandy.
Yeah, no. I mean, I didn't even do that during the pandemic. I'm still, I
a little better than me. I get it.
I heroically braved the grocery store in rural Connecticut. I thought maybe I could
heroically leaned on another group of essential workers.
Yeah, although I did face prejudice because of my New York license plate. Have I ever told you about that?
No.
When I first got, this is a tangent, but when I first got to Connecticut, I stayed at my parents' summer place in Connecticut. They were not there. I had my good friends, Evan and Catherine, with me, and we ended up staying there for 6 months. One of the things that happened in the first week we were there is I blew out a tire. I drove over a nail or whatever. And I had a spare, I put on the spare, drove it to the nearby tire place, and we pulled in to like the garage to get the tire changed. And before we could open the door, the people were like, "Get out." And I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, we're not servicing any of your kind." I'm like, "What, are we mutants? Like what's..." And then they were like, "Yeah, you're from New York." Where it was like everyone from New York was seen as being like a carrier. So we had to go down the street to another place that were like, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard, and changed our tire. But in that real moment, I felt like a real pariah.
Sure. And it took a pandemic for you to suffer some prejudice, huh?
Well, there's probably one or two other incidents, but we'll leave that to the side. So the dot-com bubble bursts. All these companies go bust. There is a minor recession, I guess, caused by that. This coincides with the collapse of Enron and a couple of other large, fraudulently run companies. And this is around when 9/11 happens also, right? So I feel like 9/11 at this point kind of intervenes culturally. And it's after 9/11 with the rise of things like the Patriot Act and... that the internet becomes...
The triumphant rise of the Patriot.
The ascension to godhood of the Patriot Act. The internet becomes to be seen as a place of danger, of potential, where terrorists could be meeting, terrorists could be plotting. It becomes a sort of a place of worry, if nothing else, right? It's also around...
Also, with with all of the things that end up happening with Snowden later on, there's also like I think this proliferation of fear of your data, right? Personal safety on the internet. Not that people really did much about it. There was already a feeling of sort of helplessness.
Right. I mean,
You know,
that was the Patriot Act, right?
yeah, but I'm just saying, like,
The Patriot Act is what got the ball rolling on the government being able to justify its seizing of every bit of information about you on the internet.
I guess what I mean is that, like, very early in this process, I think this feeling of helplessness that you're just kind of at the mercy of hoping X and Y doesn't happen to you, whether it's like the horror stories you hear of identity theft or, blackmail, someone finding your passwords, hacking into all your things. It's been
draining
around
your
for
bank
so
account.
long.
Yeah.
There's this sort of desensitization to it where, like, have you ever like been notified by like an Experian or
of
one
course,
of these
dozens of times.
and you just like read that all your information has just been exposed on something, and you're just kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to work now. They don't do something. And I think that one of the interesting things about that evolution that I think plays in weirdly to the sort of decline of like political and collective will, and the belief also paradoxically in the strength of the individual, is that like your safety and security almost came from your belief in your own insignificance. The kind of like, what would someone even do with my bank account? Good luck. Why don't you take my credit cards while you're at it, right? Or like, well, as long as you have nothing to hide, right? There's just kind of like, if I'm not significant, that's the only way that I have nothing to worry about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I still largely take comfort in the fact that I'm very insignificant in a lot.
I mean, I'm saying that has kind of become like a foundation.
That's like the default
of the way that we are able to do something that so clearly has not only like a very real danger to it, no matter how statistically improbable, but also the seeming randomness of it. Is that like, well, I'm not going to not engage in these things, and I'm just going to hope that I don't like wake up one day and I'm locked out of everything.
Yeah. No, exactly. Another thing that happens in the aftermath of 9/11 is, of course, the rise of social media, right? We have the Friendster, MySpace. I was on MySpace pretty early with various bands that I was playing in at the time. And then Facebook arrives in late 2004. I think I joined Facebook in 2004. I think I'm among the first 100,000 people to ever join Facebook, embarrassingly. Well, it was available to people at Ivy League schools before.
Oh, well, still.
Yeah. Did I mention that I went to an Ivy, Michael? Michael, are you familiar with Yale? No,
it's good. You know what we'll do? We'll start this thing out with the best and brightest among us. What could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I think in the early days of Facebook,
although I wonder if there is a small cadre of the Ivy, the early adopters who are like, man, if we just hadn't let this go up to the heathens, everything.
Well, I think it wasn't so much non-Ivies. It was when people's parents joined that Facebook was really ruined.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
and grandparents.
Well, that was later, but I remember this is when I was still drinking. So it was maybe like 2008, 2009. I was meeting a friend to go to see the band Phoenix in Williamsburg at the music hall. This is before they really blew up with the Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix album.
Another little humble brag.
Well, it was my friend Rich's idea to go to the show. I will give credit where credit is due. He was ahead of me on this one. I've been ahead of him on a few others, but on this one, he beat me to the punch. So anyway, we're going to the show, and I remember we went to this bar nearby the music hall of Williamsburg, North 6, somewhere in Williamsburg, and I posted a photo of an absinthe cocktail I'd had. Mm-hmm. And I posted it and I said, ooh, going, a little drink before Phoenix with Rich or whatever. This is when you would like post what you were doing still. It feels like very alien behavior. Now you might story this, but you wouldn't post this on the grid. You wouldn't post this. Anyway,
status update.
Immediately I get an alert and it's like my mom has commented, be careful under the... And at that moment, I just remember being like, all right, so this is over.
Time to get sober.
Well, a few years later for that. But this was nothing. My parents are literally like the people who watch my content the most, right? They're like
Sure.
addicted to my content, which not great, you know.
It's not ideal.
Just not kind of. Speaking of like liberatory,
Especially not when you look back and every 45 minutes you're posting a drink.
wow, it wasn't touche. So I think around the 2010s is when people, you know, with the rise of massive companies like Facebook, right? Where Facebook just dwarves, and Amazon, right? Amazon was around in the 90s. I was an early adopter of Amazon back when it was a bookstore. As you can tell from, if you see a clip of me ever, there's always just a huge stack of books behind me, many of them purchased on Amazon in the 1990s. These are two companies that have risen to be just gigantic. One might dare even say ginormous. And
do you think it was deliberate? I've always wondered this about Amazon because, you know, with media mail back in the day, shipping books was cheap.
That's right. Still is.
And it sort of allowed, I think, Amazon to lay this groundwork for what it became, which is this combination data and shipping company.
Yeah, I think it was 100% deliberate. Also, I think books easily warehoused, not spoiled. You know, like you make a deal with the distributor or with the publisher, and you get them at a certain rate. You get the same deal Barnes and Noble gets, or what. You know, I mean, like, I think it was just a good product to start with, and then to start building. Because I mean,
clearly,
it worked. I mean, they started selling CDs and music and movies pretty soon after books. So, I mean, it was immediate.
Again, that is media as well, right?
Other media. And then it branched out into buying batteries.
Everything?
Everything you could possibly imagine at this point, right? Oh, I need a...
Then it branched out into Rob Gronkowski erotica fan fiction.
Well, written by AI, right? I mean... So one of the critics who I really enjoyed at the time and enjoyed revisiting today is Astra Taylor, who made a couple of really smart documentaries about philosophy in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and wrote this book called The People's Platform: Taking Back Power and Culture in the Digital Age, which came out in 2014. I didn't read the whole book for this episode, but I did flip through it and read some highlights. I also watched an interview that Astra gave. I actually met Astra once at a party, like, a long time ago, 2008, 2009, something like that. Really nice person, really smart person. She's friends with some of my friends from N+1 and stuff like that. And she's like really on point. It's kind of sad reading because like she got a lot of stuff right in 2014, and now 12 years later we can be like, well, how many of Astra's ideas were like it's like none. It's just like she warned us, she told us, what was going wrong. And she did this interview with Democracy Now, basically like that thing we saw earlier in the timepiece about how the internet's kind of combining the newspaper with television. That's like one way of thinking about it, right? It's like this stream of information, of news is constant, and you can also combine that with images, all this stuff. Basically, the failure of society to adapt specifically economically to the potential of the internet is like what has helped to strangle its potential in the cradle, so to speak.
Sure.
Like, she talks about like...
Luckily, we don't seem like we're about to repeat that particular history.
Oh, no, with AI or any other new technologies, certainly not.
No, because we're just going to start sending those checks out to everybody. Which was another thing. I mean, people did talk about basic income as early as the internet, in terms of how it was going to reduce your work. And like I said, the peace dividends will be exponential.
Yeah.
So much peace, so many dividends.
So Astra did an interview with Democracy Now! In which she talked about like the problem of advertising in the age of the platform. By platform, she means YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera. Mm-hmm. The thing in the old media model, which again was funded by advertising, was a situation where you could turn off your television and you could opt out. We have a much more sort of pervasive, ubiquitous system right now. And in a way, the old problems have intensified because it's not just something, an ad isn't something you're watching actually. Now you're being watched, you're being tracked, you're being monitored. I mean, the dominant business model on the internet is surveillance. And this is going to create a lot of problems down the road. I think we need to look ahead and look at the forces that are shaping the development of these tools. So this is 2014. This is post-Snowden. This is post-Silk Road, right? This is a moment where surveillance is something on everyone's mind as, the various wars drag on. And unfortunately, as algorithms and algorithmic platform control has sort of, accelerated. Now the algorithms are like learning from how long you look. If you're like scrolling through Instagram, if you scroll slightly slower on an image of a pair of Nikes or whatever, suddenly your feed is like covered with.
Yeah. And I think this is a huge, this hits on a huge problem, right? That appears to be unsolvable, as evidenced by the decade that we've seen unfold sort of since these words, right?
Yeah.
Which is that I think we do and have looked ahead and looked at the forces that are shaping the development of these tools, to use the quote, right? Like, I think that it to the point where it's almost, to use the parlance, it's almost a meme, right? Like someone will post something about how they were talking to their friend about how they liked a couch in somebody else's apartment.
And then suddenly that couch
will
is
show up on their feed. Right. And again, it does to me go back to this helplessness, sort of the scale of the thing has sort of always been the issue to me, right? The sort of confrontation, the social aspect of it, I think, creates this illusion of community, right? The one that we were talking about earlier in the podcast, the sense that whether there's boundaries or there'll be safeguards and all of this,
there'll be a self-moderating community.
Right. But the trick, that they pull, the sort of like the devil not existing, is that this isn't fundamentally, and this it declines all the time. It's been declining since Prodigy, since the early days of convincing people that you were an adult so you get a comic book published, is that this is a confrontation with a machine, with a single person. Ultimately, that's what it is. And you can feed as much human, quote unquote, input into these things. But in terms of the way that you engage, and like you said, the takeover of algorithmic platforms and our reliance on them only continues to exacerbate this totally false connection, right? That, again, like you can point to any anecdotal thing, like, look, we're all watching the World Cup at the same time, or we're all watching Game of Thrones at the same time. But at the end of the day, your experience, how you are tracked, how you are monitored, and by extension, how you experience what is now probably the majority of your life for a lot of people, is you versus these entities, what they're trying to get out of you, and what it's trying to make you think. And that, to me, like sums up the problem with sort of merely looking ahead at the forces. I mean, again, I know that Astra's being hopeful here, and that hopefully that would then lead to some sort of safeguard
reform.
Regulation.
Yeah.
But in fact, looking at those things are the very people and institutions who seek more manipulation and more control, right? Yeah. So it's this strange paradox. We can pay as much attention as we want. We're not paying more attention than, like they said in the documentary we covered about AI, we're not paying more attention than the 20,000 people working on AI.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And so it's like, that's something that I really think people need to understand, is that you are going to battle every day your mental health versus.
That's right. And I mean, even in the early days of the internet in the early 90s, when I was doing my comic book stuff, we hated Prodigy. We hated the machine. We would say, we called Prodigy? We're really sharp. We called it Prodigreed.
Sure.
We're really incisive. Weird, our comics didn't take off. Anyway, there's always been this sense, there's always been this sort of anarchic spirit that's behind the internet, especially in the early days. But I think you're very wisely make the point that that's all well and good, but the people who are pulling the strings, so to speak, have whatever anarchic philosophies they might espouse in public, are primarily interested in harvesting as much information.
And conversely here, right? Like anarchic doesn't mean atomized at all, right? It doesn't mean disconnected. It doesn't mean individual. But there is, running alongside the evolution of the internet is sort of the increasing entrenchment and deification of the individual. So all of those, what's the way to put it? Like all of those placebos that you get, right? That sort of opiate that you are fed, where your individual desire in the moment was met, it is allowed and able to justify the rest of the mess. I ordered Thai food today and I watched the exact thing I want, and the clips that the algorithm was feeding me were perfectly funny. I'm ready to go to bed, right?
Yep.
And so like it doesn't actually provide any of the sort of sense of the early framework of the internet and the sort of more utopian ideal of it.
No, I think that's right. I mean, in her book, Astra says that there's already at that point had arisen a kind of digital feudalism, which I think we can see as each of these platforms is a kind of fiefdom where there's a duke, whether it's Elon or Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, Jeff Bezos, whatever. She says, taking this argument further, a frustrated minority have complained that we are all living in a world of digital feudalism where sites like Facebook and Tumblr, RIP, I mean, it still exists, but offer up land for content providers to work while platform owners expropriate value with impunity. And if you read the fine print, stake unprecedented claim over users' creations, right? So remember this being a big anxiety. Remember all those people posting the "I do not give Facebook permission to you." It's never been like Facebook wants to steal your IP. Like that's not it. They just want to steal like your biometrics, your attention span, your right. I mean, they just want to steal like your soul. Essentially, they don't care.
And ultimately, even with something as silly as that, the basic tack is it's not dissimilar to the way that the American sort of militarized police force and police departments around this country deal with police brutality, which is that eventually you will get worn down and carry on, right? And so like if all that comes out of George Floyd is task forces and diversity training and whatever else, then the institution has succeeded. So it's the same way that like Instagram can do untold damages and be like, good news. Get your kid a teenager account. Feeling better yet?
Yeah, exactly. So I had a long thing here about culture and intellectual property from Lawrence Lessig, who is a sort of pioneering legal scholar and someone who argued case law about this. He said something, I guess I'll just kind of go over it briefly. He has this book in 2004, which I, again, didn't read entirely, but I flipped through this week, called Free Culture. And he basically, he sort of points to one of the reasons, and this was written in 2004, so I think he's very wise. A free culture is where there are like limited restrictions placed on creators and innovators and ideas. And then that in contrast with a permission culture where creators are constantly beholding to the older established creators of the past. And this comes into play when you're trying to sample things in media, when you're trying to make a rap song, but you're sampling a song, right? And then you get sued by the person and I own this, these are essentially curbs on creativity. If you build an innovative new technology that piggybacks on existing technology, well, you still end up having to pay all these licenses and things like that, right? And that in a free culture, these restrictions would be minimal, where what we have is, in fact, a permission culture where barriers are erected over and over again. And I think one of the things that happens is like creativity and originality gets strangled because, he makes the point that in the 1920s, when a lot of the like media giants, such as Disney's a primary example he uses, were kind of coming to the fore, they're able to just like like Steamboat Willie, the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, is like a direct parody of the last Buster Keaton, one of the last Buster Keaton silent films called Steamboat Bill Jr. And like it even uses the same music, it has the same basic plot, and it's like a direct aping of that. And like the owners of Steamboat Bill didn't like sue Disney into the ground. They didn't have grounds. but it's interesting. So Mickey Mouse is created, and what's interesting is that like Disney has essentially gone to war to extend copyright as much as possible. The average copyright lasted 30 years in 1928 when Steamboat Willie came out. Today, copyright has been extended so that it lasts 95 years.
Oh, good.
So basically, like Disney, when he started out, had access to almost everything that was made in the 19th century. He could do a reversion of Grimm's fairy tales. He could do a Nathaniel Hawthorne. He could do Edgar Allan Poe, whatever he wanted, right? Free to work on all of that. And for most of my life, everything after 1923 remained in copyright until very recently because of this endless extensions. And I think that this has had the basic, like, this is part of the reason that we feel so suffocated by intellectual property, right? It's like Batman is just always Batman. And why do we keep having Batman movies? Well, Warner Brothers has owned Batman. If the Batman could have gone into the public domain in the 60s, if the old copyright laws had been maintained, probably it would have gone a little longer, but into the 80s, he would have been, anyone could make Batman. And do you think it's possible that like, if Batman is just around and anyone can use him, there might be some like more interesting outgrowths of Batman than like Robert Pattinson is here and he is, get this, he's grim and angry. You know, it's just like, oh, really? We haven't 30 years of this, right? And that like all of culture in a sense has been deadened. Creativity has been deadened by this inability to allow these things to slip into the public, right? Yeah. Like in 1998, after the Sonny Bono Copyright Extension Act is passed, which gave another 20 years of copyright. Yeah, Sonny Bono had just died in a ski accident, as you may recall. It was the weird thing, like a Kennedy died in a ski accident and then Sonny Bono died. It was a really rough time for the ski community, let me tell you. It's when everyone started wearing helmets. Anyway, Lawrence Lessig makes an important point about this. So that meant that works from after 1923 stayed in copyright an additional 20 years. They would have gone into the public domain year by year starting in 1999, but instead they didn't start until 2019. And he says that all the works from 1923 to 42 that were covered by this extension, only about 2% retain any commercial value. So only 2%. So Mickey Mouse retains value. The Wizard of Oz retains value, right? Like a very few big properties still retain intellectual value. 98% have no value. Yet all 98% also remain under copyright. So if you wanted to like do a revamp of a forgotten book, if you wanted to bring a forgotten novel that you think is really good back into print, you couldn't do that. Or there were all these permission structures that were erected. So you had to find out if the work is still in copyright. There's no centralized database of this. If it is, you have to find the descendants of the copyright. You know, in other words, it made it so that all this stuff that was created in that 20 years, some of which might be really good, might have been rediscovered and reevaluated and reinvented, remixed, changed, is just in the doldrums, is forgotten.
Wow.
And I think that's part of the reason there's this sense of cultural stagnation. Is that we've just not been, our hands have not been freed to work with stuff that older generations, people like Walt Disney, they didn't have these barriers to their creativity. Does that make sense? I mean, it's not to say that people haven't,
absolutely.
It's not to say people haven't done interesting things with Batman or Star Wars or whatever. It's like every now and then someone gets lucky and makes something good. But it's like the vast majority of it is very homogenous. And it's like,
right. It's also just a really good example of, these huge technological breakthroughs that have all of this promise, right? And that's what we hear, whether it's the internet or AI or the radio or television, right? To sort of justify their existence. That is one of the reasons why it's vital that a society has a degree of health and ability for a genuine exchange in order to make sure that the worst excesses and possibilities, the negative consequences of these things are limited, right?
Absolutely.
And so the fact that the internet existed, it's interesting to go back to the beginning of the podcast, if this came as a result of a peace dividend to the Cold War, sort of fascinating, right? I mean, not to suggest that if the communists had hold of this technology because they had won the Cold War, it all would have been rainbows and sunshine, but it certainly would have looked different and the manipulation would have been brought about in a different way. But again, the internet has laid bare the complete fragility of collective will to have any impact on any technological development whatsoever, which I think is part of why we wanted to do this, because it does tie into the AI revolution. And you hear so many. I mean, I remember, reading articles that I would get at newspapers and magazines at home as a kid about all of these things that were going to happen to the internet. Oh, my dad won't have to work as much anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember my dad traveled a ton for work. So it's maybe
now he doesn't have to do that as much. Wrong.
Right. And of course, none of this has happened. And, we can see I can be doing this podcast right now and be, expected to reply to work emails at 7:30 on a Monday night.
Well,
right?
I think we saw the backlash to remote work after the pandemic, right? It's like, oh, hold on. We lost 2% and all these sham justifications. The other thing I was going to say is I don't think it's a coincidence that as the internet is rising, this extension of the Copyright Act is passed, right? Because it's
interesting.
Well, the internet offers new distribution possibilities, right? So hey, you want to put out that book from 1934 that no one's read?
Right.
Well, here you go, right? Well, right. No, wait, you can't. Sorry. Right? We got to clamp down on that.
Anytime that you saw something come out of the internet, it ended up being just a matter of time before it was co-opted and then placed within the confines of the sort of corporatized world. I mean, even something
Napster.
Like downloading music. Yeah. Napster's the example. Yeah.
Right. It's now we have Spotify, which we'll pay for and which doesn't pay artists either. And it's how is this better? Anyway, just a final note. I just wanted to talk about John Perry Barlow. There's this rancher, poet, Grateful Dead lyricist, cyber libertarian. In 1996, published a declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, which is a cringe-inducing screed directed at governmental power as regards the then nascent internet. And I think it's really funny that he's so worried about the government. And it's yes, the government has cracked down a lot, but there maybe is some worse after he says governments of the industrial world. It's aping Marx. You weary giants of flesh and steel. I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind, capital M. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You're not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. So I like that he's really worried about governments, but it's no, buddy, governments are bad, but corporations are going to be, but you're a tech libertarian, you're going to be, no, corporations are good. And then he says, cyberspace does not lie within your borders. Do not think you can build it as though it were a public construction project. You cannot. It's an act of nature and it grows itself through our collective actions. So this kind of shit, this kind of mystical shit about the internet, it's no, buddy. The internet has physical reality. This is not very materialist, right?
And again, pretending like you're, or maybe not to be so rude about his train of thought, genuinely thinking that this was something that could be outside of these bounds, right? I think it is, obviously we can see it now, it's a mistake, but you can see that in those early days, while corporations are sort of on the back foot, trying to figure out how to implement their size and scale and scope into this thing that I'm sure to a bunch of corporations did seem to threaten to run away from their control. And thankfully, and this is, I think too long to get into now, but while corporations and institutions are certainly to blame, there's also the tragedy of our desire and sort of the influence that consumerism, the sort of deadening effect of being advertised to our whole lives through other means, all of it felt, even though we might object or say, that's not the internet we had, or, oh, you took away Vine, or, oh, you took away Tumblr, all of these moments, ultimately, our individual minds, the way that they have been shaped, so even before the internet, were ripe for the picking to go along with this. And again, I think there was really no other way that this was going to unfold. And that's sort of, the last thought I have is like, that's ultimately where I think so much justified pessimism of AI comes in, because, a lot of people said that the internet was a con and a fad, like you said. And, while I tend to think something along those lines with AI, at least it being a con in the sense that we can't afford to do this thing ultimately.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of process of like, what are you really going to do? And all of these, to use the Spotify example, it's like, same sort of thing as like a basic income, or the ease with which your menial job will get easier because of Claude, right? Actually, you're going to be able to, you don't even have to go on and look for the album and download it. It's just going to be there. Isn't that so much better? And now all the artists get paid, right? It's the same notion, I think, ultimately.
Yeah. And just like one final thing from this, he says, and I'll post a link to this Declaration of Independence. Our identities have no bodies, so unlike you, we cannot obtain order by physical coercion. We believe that from ethics, enlightened self-interest, and the common weal, our governance will emerge. Our identities may be distributed across many of your jurisdictions. The only law that all our constituent cultures would generally recognize is the golden rule. Hope we'll be able to build our particular solutions on that basis, but we cannot accept the solutions you are attempting to impose. And again, it's just not true. The golden rule thing goes back to our little groups are self-regulating. And, the golden rule also just doesn't work in real life. So why would it work in, it's like do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. It's like, well, how's that gone? I like the sentiments expressed here. It just ignores many the harmful ways the internet's been harnessed by corporations and malicious actors, and also treats the internet as if it were some mystical object outside of time and space. Is very much grounded in the here and now. All that you just said about AI, I think, very on point. We're seeing this happen again. We're seeing the mysticism. Oh, AI is conscious. Oh, Claude is like my friend. All the same kind of mumbo jumbo, when it's like, no, we got to remember the material reality that's actually.
And I think maybe that's where some of the hope might come from, is that we have just been through this.
Yeah.
Right.
This is 25 years ago, and now it's happening again.
And on the one hand,
30 years
maybe
ago.
It feels inevitable that we're just going to go through it again. On the other hand, there's such a stark example right in front of us that we sort of confront every single day.
Yeah. And I think with some of the pushback we're seeing with data centers and stuff like that, I think it's at least a little reason to have some hope. Sure. So, all right, I think that's good for today. We haven't picked our topic for next week, but I'm sure it will be fascinating whenever we do. And if you like the show, you can follow us on the podcatcher of your choice. If you really like the show, you can leave us a rating and or review on that podcatcher. You can also follow us on Instagram at the End of the World WMS, where we post exciting reels from the show. So no topic yet, but it's going to be great. This is good. This is useful. I think good conversation. Yeah. And I think you really nice points about how AI is repeating a lot of these structures. So we'll see you next week. And until then, this has been the End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and we will talk to you real soon.